So if you're an English learner, right at the beginning, what we call A1 or A2, you know this feeling. You've memorized, say, 500, maybe 1,000 words. You can say hello. But the second you try to have a real conversation or even just watch a TV show, it's like it all just turns into one big wall of noise. It's overwhelming. You can't catch the meaning. And all that vocabulary you work so hard on, it just vanishes.
It's probably the biggest frustration point for any beginner.
Yeah.
And there's this idea, this intuition that a lot of people have that says, okay, if I want to get fast, I have to listen to fast speech.
Right. Jump in the deep end.
But that's a deeply flawed idea. The result is almost always burnout. You're asking your brain to do something it is just fundamentally not ready for.
And that is exactly what we're here to talk about. We're going to provide a kind of strategic detour around that frustration. This deep dive is all about research that points to a really powerful and honestly often overlooked method for A1 and A2 learners. And that's the combination of slow English listening and shadowing.
Yeah, our goal here is to give you the blueprint, the science-backed blueprint for this method. We want to show you not just what it is, but why this specific pairing is so transformative, especially at that early stage. It's really about building a solid foundation now, so that when you get to those intermediate levels, you don't suddenly find these huge, frustrating gaps in your understanding.
Okay, let's unpack this and let's start with who we're actually talking about. We keep saying A1 and A2. For anyone who isn't familiar with the CEFR, the Common European Framework, what can a learner actually do at these levels?
It's so important to visualize this. So if you're in the A1 category, you're a true beginner. You can use very basic, very concrete
And
expression.
like greetings, asking where the bathroom is.
Exactly. Introducing yourself, saying where you live. But, and this is a huge but, the CEFR itself notes a massive limitation here. You can only have that conversation if the other person speaks very, very slowly, very clearly, and is willing to help you.
So you're basically forcing the native speaker to act like a robot just so you can keep up.
Pretty much, yeah. The processing speed just isn't there. Now, if we move up to A2, you've got better survival skills. You can understand common sentences about everyday stuff.
Shopping, family, work.
Mm-hmm. Shopping, your family, your job, local geography. You can handle simple, routine tasks like asking for directions to a landmark or filling out a basic form.
So an A2 learner can probably order a coffee just fine. But if the barista replies with a fast question using a contraction or some slang, they might just freeze.
That's a perfect example. They're functional and predictable situations, but that natural speed, unpredictable speech, it still causes a total system crash. And that brings us to our first really big insight from the sources. At both of these levels, A1 and A2, your brain is still actively building its core language processing skills.
And if that system is still, under construction, what happens when you just flood it with fast native speed audio?
Think of your brain like a computer CPU, its processor. When you're a beginner, that CPU has very little working memory for English. So if fast audio comes flying in, say, at 150 words per minute, that data rate just completely overwhelms the processor's ability to analyze it.
The processor overheats, basically.
Precisely. The whole system just short circuits. You end up mixing up sounds, you can't tell where one word ends and the next begins, and you fail to pull out any meaning. And I have to stress, this isn't about intelligence. It's about input management.
And that leads to that feeling of failure. Learners think they're the problem when really the information is just coming in way too fast to be processed as language. It's just noise.
It's just noise.
So if that's the problem, then slow English isn't just a nice to have, it's the foundation. It has to be. I remember when I was learning a new language, I worried that if I listened to slow stuff, I'd become a slow speaker, that it was somehow cheating. But the research says the opposite. Rushing is the big mistake.
Rushing is the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It creates bad habits, and it reinforces anxiety. Slow English isn't just easier, it's functionally mandatory for the neurological mapping to happen correctly. It gives the brain the time it needs to do three critical things that fast speech just makes impossible.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
The first one is clear sound recognition. When English is spoken slowly, you can actually hear the individual sounds. And crucially, you can notice the boundaries between words. You know how words can kind of mush together in natural speech?
Like what she's going to do becomes one word.
Right. Slow speech separates those back into their distinct parts. And this is how you start to tackle those really tricky sound differences.
The classic example our sources brought up was ship versus sheep.
Yes. For a beginner, if a native speaker says those quickly, they can sound identical because the difference in the vowel sound is so subtle and fast. Slow speech actually highlights that difference.
And if you can't hear it right, you can't say it right later on.
You can't possibly. That auditory skill is non-negotiable. So the second benefit is improved comprehension. And this goes right back to that CPU idea.
Giving the processor time to actually do its job.
Yes. Slower speech lets your brain chunk the words together. So instead of hearing 7 random separate words in a sentence, you start to recognize patterns. You see phrases and grammatical structures as one single unit of meaning.
It's the difference between looking at a pile of bricks and seeing a wall.
That's a perfect analogy. And if the input is too fast, you lose that ability to chunk. You just fall back to frantically trying to identify single words, and you miss the whole point of the sentence.
And the third benefit.
The third is reduced anxiety. This one gets overlooked, but it's so important. Fast English just generates this constant feeling of failure. It's always telling the beginner, you can't do this.
Whereas slow English lets you succeed.
Every single day, every time you understand a slow, clear sentence, you build a little bit of confidence. And that confidence isn't a bonus, it's a requirement for learning. When you're calm and you feel successful, your brain is just much better at forming those new neural pathways.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because listening, even slow listening, is still pretty passive. It's input. So if that's the input training, we need an output mechanism to actually turn that into speaking. So let's talk about the second pillar here, shadowing.
Shadowing is the activator. It's a technique where you listen to English being spoken and you repeat it out loud. You're trying to follow the speaker as closely as you can, almost like a verbal echo.
So you're maybe a word or two behind them, mimicking in real time. This is very different from just, listen, pause, repeat.
It's much more active. And the focus isn't on getting every single word perfect. The focus is on imitation. You're trying to capture the rhythm, the stress patterns, the intonation, the whole musicality of the sentence.
And the really important point here, the one we have to keep coming back to, is that for A1 and A2 learners, this has to be done with slow, clear audio. Otherwise, you're just...
It's practicing your mistakes.
Yeah.
You can't accurately copy a sound you didn't hear clearly. That's the danger. Now, as to why this works so well for beginners, it forces this big cognitive shift. When you shadow, you're lighting up multiple systems at once. You're listening, you're speaking, you're using your memory, and you're building pronunciation.
And you mentioned muscle memory. You mean literally training your mouth, your tongue, your jaw.
Exactly that. You are physically teaching your mouth how to make English sounds, and you're timing it with what you're hearing. This physical practice is what helps you finally stop translating everything in your head.
Ah, that's the big one.
It is. And instead of that long process of, hear English, translate to my language, think of a reply, translate back to English, then speak shadowing just cuts through all of that.
You're training your brain to connect the sound you hear directly with the physical act of making that sound. You're teaching yourself, this is what English feels like to say.
That direct connection is the absolute bedrock of fluency. You start to bypass the intellectual analysis and you develop a real instinctual feel for the language.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, on their own, these two things have limits. Slow listening is great, but it's passive. Shadowing with the wrong audio is just, it's counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when they merge? Why is this specific combination so transformational?
Because they create a perfect self-reinforcing loop. The slow listening gives you this high-quality, totally digestible input. You understand the grammar, you hear every sound clearly, you know where the word boundaries are.
So when you go to shadow that clean, understood input,
you are practicing success. You're not just repeating noise, You know what you're saying, and you understand why it sounds the way it does. And this means your pronunciation is better, your rhythm feels more natural, and your speaking confidence just shoots up way faster than if you were just guessing at fast audio.
It takes away the cognitive struggle. The input is slow enough to handle, and the output, just mimicking, is also manageable because that input was so clear.
And think about it this way. If you can clearly hear where the stress falls in a word, you can copy it successfully. If you copy it successfully, you strengthen that correct pattern in your memory. This is basically how children learn a language.
Right. They hear small, clear chunks from their parents.
And they copy them. They repeat these simple, understood patterns at a pace they can handle until it just becomes automatic.
So you're kind of reverse engineering that natural process for an adult learner, but in a really structured way. That makes a ton of sense.
It's a smart approach. It frees you from that pressure to just be fast for the sake of being fast.
Okay, let's make this super practical. For someone listening right now who's ready to start this tomorrow, what are the actual steps? What's the difference between what an A1 learner and an A2 learner should be doing?
For the A1 learner, simplicity is everything. You have to keep the stakes low. You should be using audio with very short, simple sentences about survival topics.
Greetings, food, family.
Exactly. Greetings, describing an object, ordering food, basic family stuff. And for the practice itself, say in your 5 or 10 minutes, you need to do it in phases. First, just listen. Listen to the short sentence until you're sure you understand it.
Don't even try to speak yet.
Not yet. Only then do you try shadowing it, sentence by sentence. And your focus has to be super narrow. Just clear pronunciation, noticing the pauses, and getting the main word stress right.
Can you give us an example of a phrase they might use?
Something as simple as, hello, my name is Anna. I like the blue shirt. Short, clear, totally manageable. That's how you build success early.
Okay, so then for the A2 learner, you've got a few more resources in your brain so you can bump up the complexity a little.
Right. A2 learners are ready for slightly longer sentences and, more importantly, short dialogues. Instead of just isolated sentences, they should be shadowing little conversations that mimic real tasks. A really key practice here is to focus on question and answer patterns.
Oh, so you're not just echoing anymore. You're practicing your part in a conversation.
Yes. For example, shadowing, what do you do for work? And then immediately shadowing the answer, I work as a shop assistant. I like my job. And for A2 learners, repetition is huge. Use the same 5-minute audio for several days in a row. You want the rhythm of that little dialogue to feel completely automatic.
Now, what about the ways people can sabotage this? It sounds simple, but it requires discipline. What are the common mistakes that just undermine the whole process?
There are 4 big traps. Number 1, and we started the whole deep dive with this, is choosing audio that is too fast. It's the biggest demotivator, and it's a fast track to practicing bad pronunciation because you're just copying a sound you haven't actually analyzed correctly.
Right. If the input's a blur, the output will be a blur. What's number 2?
Silent shadowing. You absolutely must repeat the audio out loud. If you're just whispering or doing it in your head, you're keeping it intellectual. You're not building the muscle memory in your throat, your tongue, your mouth. And that's what you need for real fluency. Speaking has to be a physical reflex.
Not just a mental math problem.
Yeah.
And number 3, this goes back to the brick wall analogy.
Focusing only on words. So many beginners think English is just a big vocabulary test. They'll pause the audio to look up every single word. But the research is clear. Fluency doesn't come from how many isolated words you know. It comes from mastering the rhythm and the flow that connect those words.
So focus on the music, not just the lyrics.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, trap number 4, practicing inconsistently. Language learning is all about strengthening those neural pathways. One giant 2-hour session on a Saturday is so much less effective than 10 minutes of focused, successful practice every single day.
Frequency beats volume.
Every time.
So what does this all mean? If someone listening commits to this patient, slow shadowing practice, what's the big payoff when they finally break through that A2 ceiling and start dealing with faster, more complex stuff?
The benefits just compound over time.
Yeah.
Because you've trained your ears to hear sounds accurately, the ship versus sheep thing, and you've trained your mouth to reproduce natural rhythm thousands of times, your listening comprehension at higher levels will be so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Your pronunciation will be clear, your speech will just have a more natural, fluid sound,
Yeah.
and you'll have this deep well of confidence to draw from when you're in a real conversation.
So you're not just learning vocabulary, you're proactively building the foundation to prevent those gaps that so many intermediate learners fall into later on.
That is the core message. Fluency isn't about chasing speed. It's about mastering the foundation with slow, clear input and intentional, successful output. It's a smarter neurological strategy.
This intentional method is really the key. So, as we wrap this up, here's a thought for you to take away. Think about the one specific part of English that is giving you the most trouble right now. Is it a specific sound distinction? Is it the way words seem to disappear when people talk fast? Maybe it's telling the difference between tenses. What's the one thing you currently just hear as noise? And now ask yourself how just 5 or 10 minutes of focused, slow shadowing every day could start to transform that one specific point of frustration. If you apply this patient, consistent method, you will see a breakthrough.